Good evening and welcome to the City Planning Commission meeting for April 1st. I am Denise Tucker. I am the clerk of this meeting, and due to the absence of the chair and the vice chair, I would ask that the members elect a chairperson pro tem.
Madam Chair, I'll nominate Jesse Schmidt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Jesse.
Jesse's it.
With that, Madam Chair, if I may, on the consent agenda tonight, item 1 is the approval of the March 4, 2015 minutes of the regular meeting. Item 2 is March plats. Item 3 is a 2054-2014 rezone from the AG Agricultural District to the RS Single Family Residential Suburban District for allowed forms located at 3205 South 6 Mile Road. Item 4, 2249-2015 rezone from the AG Agriculture District to the RS Single Family Residential Suburban for allowed forms located east and west of North Marlowe Avenue and north of East Paddington Street. Item 5. It's a 2275-2015 rezone from the AG Agriculture District to the C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar and the O Office Districts for allowed forms located at 7901 East 57th Street. Item 6. 2353-2015 rezone from the RS Single Family Residential Suburban CN Conservation, POPUD, Pedestrian-Oriented Planned Unit Development, RD1 Twin Home Deluxe Residential, RA2 Apartment Residential Medium Density, LW Live, Work, and C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar Districts to the RS Single Family Residential, RD2 Townhome Residential Suburban, RA3 Apartment Residential High Density, LW Live, Work, O Office, and C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District for allowed forms located north of East Madison Street and east-west of proposed Highway 100. Item 7. 2361-2015 rezone from the O Office District to the RA2 Apartment Residential Moderate Density and C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District for allowed forms located south of West 57th Street and east of South Marion Road.
We good there, Denise? Okay. So we have the consent agenda read. I understand that item 4 is to be pulled off the consent agenda and moved to the regular agenda. So we'll hear item number 4 when we move to the regular agenda. So I will look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, I so moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Can I amend to move item 4 to the regular?
You certainly can.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. We're going to vote on
The
amendment first. All those in favor of that?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Okay. So we're done with the consent. No, we're going to vote on the consent agenda. Okay. So we've moved item number 4. Now we have the consent agenda. We have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. Is there anybody that would want anything else moved off the consent agenda to the regular agenda? Seeing none, I will see if there's any comments from the commissioners, or we're good to vote. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed? So we've approved the consent agenda. So any of you that are here for any of the items on the consent agenda, which would be items number 1 through 7, with the exception of item number 4, are free to leave. And we will vote on the regular agenda.
Move to approve the regular agenda?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the regular agenda. Any discussion? No? With item 4 being number 1, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed?
Item 4, 2249, 2015, rezoned from AG Agricultural District to RS Single Family Residential Suburban for allowed forms located east and west of North Marlowe Avenue and north of East Paddington Street.
Good evening, Diane DeCoyer with the Planning Office. The property we are looking at here is located north of North Marlowe Avenue and south of the eastern section of Great Bear. The land is currently vacant. The applicant, John Schutte, is proposing to rezone 26.17 acres from the agriculture to the RS Single Family Residential Suburban District to construct 17 single-family residential homes. Lot sizes vary from 1.1 to 3.8 acres. A previous developer requested to rezone this property over 6 months ago, in which it was approved by Planning Commission, but denied by City Council due to neighborhood concerns of increased traffic through the area during construction. The new property owner held a neighborhood meeting last week to review the concerns from the neighbors and can address your questions regarding that meeting. The property was annexed into the city on April 15th in 2014. There is access to the major street network, and adequate provision for municipal utilities will occur when sanitary sewer and the water main are extended from the south, running north within the North Marlowe right-of-way. A post-construction BMP or detention pond will also be required. Because the proposed single-family residential development is in compliance with the Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan, and proper land use transitions exist to the same RS single-family homes to the south, planning staff recommends approval for this rezone. And I can answer any questions you might have.
Any questions of staff?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Diane, this looks different to me than the one we looked at 6 months ago. Is this the exact?
It is the exact same plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions of staff? Thank you, Diane. Is the petitioner here, please?
Hi, I'm John Schutte, and do you need my address for the record?
No, we don't need your address. Do you have anything you'd like to add, John, to the plan?
You know, I've visited with adjoining property owners, the developer to the south. We had a neighborhood meeting last week and had great conversation. I understand their concerns. I know there's been a little bit of work done in negotiating for more access. Those negotiations continue. Hopefully, we'll have some more good news to bring in the very near future in that regard. But their concerns are heard, and I want to work with the neighbors. I want to work with the city to make it happen.
Thank you. Are there any questions of John? No. Thank you, John. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak on item number 4?
My name is Todd Miller. I'm from Canterbury Heights subdivision. Basically, I don't know how many of you realize that the access to this that is shown, which is the same thing that was shown to you folks 6, 8, 9 months ago, does not show that Marlowe, which they say is the access to this neighborhood, is a dead-end street. Canterbury Heights has 5 other dead-end streets and only 35 houses. A beautifully designed one-legged stool. Okay? It's a long stretch of property that goes north and south. There's no access essentially from the east, and there won't be from the north. The developers of Canterbury Heights chose not to do what the city said that they must do in Phase 2 and Phase 3. So when Diane says that we're concerned about traffic, that is a gross understatement of the situation. There were supposed to be other access roads to Madison Street. that were going to handle the north-south traffic. And when you have a property that has no access essentially from the east and has no access from the north, it's imperative that you have that access road. The final phase 2 of Canterbury Heights in the phase 3 states that East Tahoe Street and North Highline Avenue will be graded and graveled until such time as adjacent property is developed. The gravel surface will be maintained throughout the winter months. And phase 3 says that it's going to be done, that Highline was going to be all the way up, so it accessed and gave us another entrance to the neighborhood and a fire escape. It was not. We went 6 years after we had 30 units in our neighborhood until this was brought up last fall, before we ever even had an emergency exit to our neighborhood. And that still is not up to snuff. So it's a whole lot different. Ironically, in 2004, before the development was started, we have a copy of a letter of an email from a concerned neighbor, Rodney Voller, that contacted the urban planner's office and said, they're concerned about the traffic that would be coming out with Canterbury Village is essentially got about 30 units, and then there's Canterbury Heights that's got another 35. We're at 65 units in Canterbury right now. And so we have a one-legged stool. But anyway, the email said, hey, I'm concerned about this, and Steve Randall responded from the City of Sioux Falls Planning and Building Services and says, I've spoken with city engineers about it, and they are advising the developer that he cannot proceed beyond 30 units until a second means of ingress, egress is provided. A north-south collector street along the east side of the property should serve as the easiest and quickest way out to Madison from this subdivision. Okay, so they did not say that it had to be just another emergency exit. They said ingress and egress. So Mike Cooper likes to talk about us being confused about emergency or fire code exit versus another one. Clearly, the urban planning department was confused as well, because he stated that there needed to be another ingress and egress exit. So we went 7 years without making a stink. But then when they tried to wanted to add additional traffic, an additional building, put more stories on a house that only has one side of the foundation, we said, wait a minute, enough is enough here. And that's why we had city council members out. Every one of them came out to visit, and it was voted down 7-1. Very little has changed since last fall, and we're kind of frustrated that us citizens have to take so much time out of our schedule to address that. To make sure that you're properly disclosed as what is really going on there. When you show, maybe you guys have a better picture, but that does not show what's going on. You can't get to Marlow. You can't get, previously they said you go to Marlow to Dubuque. And even the property, when John Schutte bought it, the advertisement on the auction said that you get there from Madison to Marlow. Well, you can't get there. You have to go to Dubuque, then you have to go to Tahoe, then you have to go to Maynard, then you have to go to Paddington. And Paddington has taken all the traffic for all of the construction, and there's another 55 units that if the developer of Canterbury Heights does not address and actually build the north-south road, and that's what to John's credit, he's trying to work with them to get them to do that in a cooperative effort. And John has been good to deal with, but we still have a one-legged stool. So we want the development. We love what John is proposing. It's like saying you love to put 2 more stories on your house, but you only have one side of the foundation on. I don't see how it's, and the city council concurred. It's like, well, there's no reason why we should make this problem worse than it already has been allowed to occur. So we would love to have it approved, but on the condition that the access, the north-south exit, the east road is put in. And in fact, what's happened 11 years later, we just learned 11 years, this neighborhood started 2004, is now the city planning office is actually proposing eliminating much of Highline Avenue. I guess they had an Etch-a-Sketch that they like playing with, but I mean that's concerning. I understand why the original plans are changed, but 11 years into a development when people have bought lots and now we're getting rid of one of the main arteries into the neighborhood. Not getting rid of, they're making adjustments to it, is what we're told. And it may be all fine and good, but kind of concerning that 11 years later that the main exit that nobody actually did, the developers never actually did, is now actually being proposed to change it. So kind of concerned about that all happening behind the scenes. So.
Are there any additional questions for Todd? No? Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this item? Okay. Would you like to come back up and address any of the questions that they brought forward, Jeff or Diane?
I can start, and if you have any other questions for the applicant or for staff, please feel free. Jeffrey Schmidt from the City Planning Office. We've referenced Diane DeCoyer's here. Mike Cooper's the planning director for anybody out there that's listening, and I'm Jeff Schmidt with the planning department. The interesting thing here is that this is a rezoning request that's in front of you today. The rezoning request is, it's currently zoned ag, and is it appropriate to rezone it to RS residential single family for 17 lots? This is not a preliminary subdivision plan, which you've dealt with before. It's not a preliminary subdivision plan for Canterbury Heights. The issues that he brings up are issues that should be addressed and will be addressed, and that's why he keeps referencing Mr. Cooper and the city council, but that's not the item that's before you this evening. He brings up some valid points about, would you want to build a house that's missing a foundation? Well, probably not, but that's not what you're looking at should you build a house. The question that's in front of you today is this an appropriate place to put single-family houses on that property, or should it remain ag? So there's your two choices. Should it remain ag, or should it have single-family houses on it?
Jeff, can you clarify for the audience the next step? There's the rezoning process. Then what are the next steps?
Planning Commission's an advisory board to City Council. So you can deny it, and it's going to go to City Council. If you approve it, it's going to go to City Council. City Council then has 2 public hearings on it, and if City Council approves it, then it can go forward. If they deny it, the applicant still has an opportunity to bring it back to that decision-making body. Okay? At that point, then they actually have the land zoned or not zoned. If the land's zoned, then they have to have preliminary subdivision plans brought in. They have to meet all minimum standards, just as Canterbury does, or Cactus Heights, or any of the other projects. Minimum standards are for pipe sizes, for drainage, for contours, for curb and gutter, sidewalks, fire hydrants. Any utilities would have to meet minimum standards. And a lot of what we're talking about, and again, I'm not deep into the weeds on this project, but there are people in City Hall that are. It's a phasing, it's a timed approach to how construction gets done in Sioux Falls, not only here, but everywhere. That the project was approved by all departments, and it will be done in phases. So they're meeting minimum standards. There's no way right now, unless the laws change, to say you have to completely complete your project all-encompassing from the very beginning. We've always allowed people to do it in phased approaches. You don't complete your entire subdivision from the get-go and then start. They're doing it in a phased approach.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Jeff?
Jeff, if I may, I know the 30 house rule is a fire code issue.
Right.
It shows Marlowe coming in. It also then shows, I believe the name of that street is Markham.
Right.
Are both of those streets going to be in use? And maybe I should ask that to John, if that's in intention.
They will both be in use as it continues to get built out, but right now the one to the west doesn't go anywhere. It's showing the future plans, and that's what the developments always do, is they show their future build out, that there's connectivity to the west, and that meets our minimum standards.
Can the neighbors be assured that the fire department has looked at this and signed off on it also?
That's correct. As well as the engineering department has, that there shows connectivity.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so I will look for commission action on item number 4.
Motion to approve for discussion.
Second.
Item number 4.
You know, we did take a long look at this deal 6 months ago and was approved at this level for whatever reasons. I know the council said no. I know John Schutte a little bit, and I hope some of the neighbors have had a chance to meet him. He's a pretty square shooter. I think he's trying to pick up a development that, yeah, it had some problems. Depending on things going forward, I think he'll try to solve those problems. Can it? Will it take some time? I think to get there, it probably will. But having said that, from a rezone angle, it'd be hard for me not to support the rezone. I think there'll be another issue, certainly at council, when they take a look at it, as far as making everybody satisfied as to how this is going to go, and maybe it'll be a little bit better explained than at the council level. But because of that, and I'd support it. I'd support the amendment personally. But
Thank you, Kenny. Anybody else?
Madam Chair, I'm going to echo a little bit what Kenny said, and that our task here is to look at the land use, and does it make sense to have single-family homes next to single-family homes? We're talking about some of the other issues that have been brought up. I think those will get raised, like Ken said, at council and through the city as the engineers and traffic folks and the fire and police take a look at the development. But for the purposes of right now, does single-family belong next to single-family?
Anything else? I would agree, Nick. I think actions don't happen in one fell swoop, so an automatic a rezone of this property is not a slam dunk that this development is going to go forward as it's pictured here, or even as they may have been told several years ago. So this is the first step in a process, and we're here to talk tonight about rezoning this land from agricultural to single family. There's no additional discussion. I will call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed? Item number 4 passes.
Item 8, 2341-2015 rezone from the RS Single Family Residential Suburban and RD1 Twin Home Duplex Residential Suburban Districts to the C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District for allowed forms located at 504 and 604 South Hillview Road.
Good evening, Diane DeCoyer with planning staff again. As Denise indicated, the property is located at 504 and 604 South Hillview Road, which is south of East Arrowhead Parkway and west of South Foss Avenue. The applicant, Bryant Soberg, is proposing to rezone 1.75 acres from RD1 Twin Home Duplex Residential and RS Single Family Residential District to the C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District for future commercial developments. The applicant is planning to demolish the existing homes and get the parcels ready for development. A concept plan was not submitted with this application. Due to the adjacency to the south and west of single-family homes, the applicant will be required to provide a level C buffer yard. A level C includes a 30-foot setback with a 4-foot high berm or 6-foot tall fence and 40 units of landscaping per 100 lineal feet. The north and east sides are adjacent to commercial properties, therefore buffer yards are not required there. This parcel will be combined with the 5 existing C2 commercial parcels to the north and east for future development. These parcels have frontage onto a Type 1 arterial street, Arrowhead Parkway. Due to existing and adjacent single-family homes, compatibility with this development notes that external effects should be directed away from lower intensity uses. Landscaping, buffering, and screening should be employed to minimize negative effects. The comprehensive plan shows this area to be a developed area, and 2/3 of the property had previously been zoned as C2, but due to the existing homes on the parcels, under Shaped Places, it was zoned back to RD1 and RS in April of last year. Testimony during the public hearing tonight should shape the decision on this rezoning matter because the application is consistent with the Shaped Sioux Falls Comprehensive Plan. Approval of this rezone would be acceptable.
Thank you. Any questions for Diane?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Diane, can you refresh me with what's acceptable in C2 or what's allowed, the forms that are allowed in C2?
The forms that are allowed,
Yeah, forms or types of things that you would see there.
RE2 and RE3, so it allows for some retail and services, commercial. I know I'm forgetting. That's office, pretty much standard to what you might expect.
Building size?
25,000 is the maximum.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions of Diane?
And whenever we encroach into the single family, did you recommend a neighborhood meeting for the petitioner?
Yes, and they did hold one, so I think the applicant can address that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Is the petitioner here, please?
Good evening, Raquel Blount, Lloyd Companies, 101 South Reed, Suite 201. So, here this evening to talk to you about the parcel. Obviously, this development piece is on the entrance to the Walmart and going into the retail development. Looking here to provide neighborhood services, retail, and first-class shopping center environment or services and types of uses that conform with this zoning. As Diane mentioned, 2/3 of this land had the commercial zoning in the past. So just looking to create a parcel to work with to provide those services. And just want to answer any questions that you might have.
Rochelle, did you have a neighborhood meeting? Did you visit with any of the neighbors?
Yep, we did. We held a neighborhood meeting last week at That's a Pizza, the former That's a Pizza building, and had 3 individuals show up, and 4 people, representative of 3 houses, and had some great dialogue and discussion about the area and the consistency down East 10th Street. And the comments were just the neighbors hoping that we would comply with the types of items in place with the Shape Sioux Falls. Everything that would be done on site would conform with what has been put into Shape Sioux Falls with the setbacks and berming and zoning and light protections and all of those things. So questions were asked about the types of uses and that. We don't have that locked in yet, so there isn't a definitive plan, but others have come forth with zoning in the area and received zoning based on the consistency in the area. So, of course, any plan would obviously meet any and all standards.
I haven't been out to the site. That area, that brown to the right, is that a detention area?
Yes.
And that would be for
Yep.
the Walmart and such?
Conservation, yep. Mm-hmm. That is ponding. Now, there might be some additional ponding that would be needed within this development, and so that would be accounted for. That would all be engineered and designed to, obviously working with city staff and complying with their requirements for ponding. So if we needed to do some on-site drainage, that would be designed.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Raquel?
Raquel, do you represent the owners of all of the property, C2, bordering this to the north and to the east?
I represent the owners that are within this particular parcel that we're asking to rezone, not anything outside of that.
So the owners, okay, of the RD and what you're looking to rezone?
Yes.
You guys do not control the C2 to the north or the C2 to the east? The red sections you see up there?
Yes, it's the same owner.
It is the same owner, okay.
Correct.
Can you generally address how you plan to provide access then to this area that's proposed for rezone?
Mm-hmm. What we would do once we received zoning and got further into these discussions, we would make an appointment with Shannon Austin or engineering staff and sit down and work through that process with them. So we're not asking for access at this point. We're not indicating an arrowhead access or anything like that. We're just saying that will conform with the guidelines that the city sets forth as far as what's possible for this area. Likely, there already exists access off Foss. So my assumption is we would be working with that existing access into there. And then Hillview. I would say it's unlikely with the lighted intersection at Foss that, there would be access available on Arrowhead.
And that's really something that's going to come out of engineering. Again, this is a rezone of the recommended parcels. So. Anything else for Raquel? Thank you, Raquel.
Thanks.
Anybody in the audience wish to speak on this item?
My name is Jerry Berg, and Raquel is a hard act to follow, but I'll give it my best shot. My wife and I have lived in the house immediately south of this proposed rezone for 38 years. And we own our house, and over the course of time, as people have moved on, I purchased the house, 3 houses across the street and the one immediately to the south. So I have 5 properties up against this. We're just very concerned about the closeness of the development. I have a garage behind my house that I have shared the driveway with the lady next door for the 38 years. And we each have about 10 feet of that driveway, so this would cause some pain and consternation if I were to lose my access. Now, she did say that there is no proposed plans, but someplace off of a website, we did get a proposed plan and a rendering over here, and I thought perhaps it would be here, otherwise I'd have made copies for everybody. And the way it's set up, depending on the plan, there's a strip mall right next to my garage. My garage, I think, is 7 or 8 feet from the property line, so it would be very close to that. The southwest corner would be about 40 feet from my garage. That same corner would be less than 100 feet from my bedroom. The house right next door to us, and again, this is a proposed plan that I pulled off a web page, would be gone, and it would be lowered, and so consequently, it would be substantially lower than the grade, just because she's got the highest house in the neighborhood. And so that then becomes, my bedroom being on the northeast corner of our house, that becomes like a 40 foot away where all the employee parking would be. It's just, again, I want to reiterate that that's a plan I pulled off a website, and they have said that there aren't any. And so obviously the front of this mall, which is right next to my garage, is like 160 feet away. And then, of course, another building, which would be where the first 2 houses are setting, is a kind of a box store, and so the loading dock, and I can show you the plans if you want to see them, there's a loading dock 150 feet straight across this parking lot, again, from my bedroom. We live obviously close to Walmart, and I always thought Walmart would not be a good neighbor. It's 800 feet away, and every morning they sweep their parking lot, so it's a very annoying noise, and unless you have the TV on or something, it gets me up early and gets started early. But anyway, and as far as Hillview goes, we would have more traffic on Hillview through the neighborhood. There's already quite a bit of traffic. It's kind of a shortcut. And if you had a popular grocery store or, a pharmacy, CVS or something, it would make it even worse. Hillview is a narrow street with no curb and gutter or sidewalk, and consequently it's kind of dangerous. One of the things that, as you get into the website for tonight's meeting, on Section 8, when you get back a little ways, it says the engineer report, let's see here. Traffic engineer, no access from these parcels to Arrowhead Parkway. Access will need to come from Hillview with redevelopment. Urban street improvement may be required. Well, with 5 properties, that'd be, and and there's people on the block that own their homes, and that kind of improvement would just be prohibitive. So if they widen the street, it'd be a burden for everybody that, would verge on being pretty incredible. The city engineer, of course, I just read it, recommends we come and go out of Hillview Road, nothing off of Arrowhead, but directly across the street from Arrowhead on the mall, that has an access. Now, I realize that's not a turning lane, it's an entrance lane coming off of Foss, so I appreciate the difference, but they do access close to the Foss intersection. And let's see. And just this evening, as we're trying to, of course, everybody on Hillview is coming to the meeting at the same time, so there we all sit lined up with somebody coming off of Linden Lane trying to turn. So if you can imagine coming from the east, a line of traffic, or people trying to get back into the neighborhood to take a shortcut off of the heavy traffic, it would be a mess. And then, so with my little investment thing going on here, I own one of the houses on Linden Lane, and there's currently a sidewalk. You can see it. It's the white line just on the north side of the, there's no curb or anything, so it makes it possible for somebody to walk in a designated walk area, and people aren't driving on it, but there's, can't get any closer to the highway, and obviously if you're not paying attention, they're walking on the street. So that this then turns Linden Lane into, which in my opinion, Linden Lane's just a driveway access street to the 8 houses that live there. And with an entrance onto Hillview, Linden Lane will become somewhat of a thoroughfare to the mall, and then, I guess the moral of the story is, last but not least, is the my perceived decrease in the property values of my houses. So.
Thank you, Jerry. Does anybody have any questions for Jerry?
Jerry, you had mentioned you've got 5 houses there, and I didn't quite, are the houses on Linden Lane?
Yeah. It's the one, well, my house, it's that one, that one, then of course mine, and the one immediately to the south.
Okay. This driveway that you talk about, is that a separate driveway to your garage?
Well, yeah, right on the north side, you can see the line is actually, that's the neighbor's garage, the white building, the white roof, and the one right beside it was a brown roof with a couple of trailers sitting there. That's mine right there.
Do you have an easement agreement with this individual?
We don't.
Okay.
My bad.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any additional questions for Jerry? Thank you, Jerry. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this item?
Hi, I'm Bill Fuller. I live approximately 1 block away on Gordon Drive. Jean and I have lived there for 30-some years. There's a couple things that I want you to keep in mind. First of all, Hillview is a very quaint neighborhood. The people who live on Hillview are not rich, just like the people who live on Gordon Drive are not rich. Those houses, those residences have been there for years. There's been some reference to the fact that this was previously Zone C2, and now we're just coming back to get it rezoned C2. That may be the case, but there's always been houses there, not businesses, not commercial property. Ms. Blount brought up the fact that in regard to the question about access, that they would do whatever the city engineering recommended. Well, the city engineering is recommending no access from Arrowhead. That's the recommendation. So if there's no access from Arrowhead, where does the access come from? And they're talking about Hillview. And they're talking about improvements to Hillview, which may mean curb and gutter, widening the street. And the people who live on Hillview, you can see on the overhead that there are residences across the street from the commercial development. And so in essence, we're having people who live in residences perhaps pay for part of the cost of developing commercial property that they don't own. This has always been a nice neighborhood. Jerry Berg lives right next to this proposed commercial development. He's lived there for years. And I would just caution you as a body to not just pass on this because you're thinking all we're doing is changing the zoning, because it's more to it than just changing the zoning. Because we're dealing with a significant access problem here. And the developer said that they will follow the recommendation from the city engineer, and the city engineer is recommending no access from Arrowhead. And so what is that going to do to Hillview? What is it going to do to the neighborhood as a whole? So I'd ask you to defer this, to take this on for further study before you pass for the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Bill? Thank you, Bill. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
Hi, I'm Jean Fuller, married to Bill, almost quite a bit longer than we've lived on Gordon Drive. And I would ask that you guys take a visit out there and see what it's like. I understand the shape places and we voted for it, but you're talking about this buffer and all this stuff. Well, come and see the garbage in our neighborhood that's blowing in. And we do have a berm and we do have a fence. I go out every day and clean up garbage. I got stuff from Taco Bell, I got stuff from Menards. I have garbage all over my yard. And so as you think of, changing all this, and I think of those people on Linden Lane are not rich. They've lived there a long time. And what you're going to do is set it up for a big racetrack. I know this is another issue, but come stand on my deck. You can see 3 billboards flashing all night. Come up in my bedroom at night. I can't open the window anymore because there's billboards flashing and keeping the light going. So, we're not a neighborhood that squeaky wheels or, sue people or anything like that. We just want a little consideration as to people who have lived there a long time and anchored the neighborhood and make it what it is and make it a nice area. That's why people want to be there. Thank you.
Hang on, Jean. Any questions for Jean?
I'll bring you out. I'll show you. This morning I was out walking behind with my dogs. There's a fence back there. There's a mud puddle in there, and I hear quack, quack, quack. There's some mallards, nesting there, which is fine, semi-hilarious, because it's full of garbage. There's little ducks and then all this garbage all around. I really wish you guys would come out and take a look at that. You would be disappointed. It's not. I'm born and raised in Sioux Falls. My grandfather came here 60 years ago to coach, Howard Wood. I've been here a long time. I've seen the city. I'm proud of our city. I like our city clean and neat, and I think we need to be fair to everybody, not the big, huge houses, not the little guy, too.
Thank you, Jean.
Yep.
I'll take one more. I'm going to take one more, and then I'll have you come back, Cal.
Hi, I'm Kurt Hansen, and I live 4 houses down from Jerry, which is at 800 South Hillview. When Walmart wanted to propose their building, we all had a neighborhood meeting, they call it, and it was the whole neighborhood. Well, this other lady was talking about a neighborhood meeting. I don't know what she consists of, a neighborhood meeting. I've never heard nothing about this until Jerry told us just the other day. And it's all right with Walmart being so far away, but I think this is just going to be a big bottleneck at the end of that block. And we've talked about maybe closing the street, you know, so that the traffic doesn't, because right now the traffic is pretty bad on Hillview. The kids race down there to they cut off of Sycamore and down 10th Street, you know, to avoid that light up there. So they come flying through the neighborhood. But I think that we gave up having Walmart in our backyard, because our backyard is the detention pond and then Arrowhead, and the lights shine over the top. They did put some trees up, but it is still pretty bright. And then in the mornings when it's dark out, our yard's nice and bright from all the, you know, the parking lot lights. But I think if that's down there, it's just going to be more traffic, and then on when you go down Hillview, you can't even, like, we left tonight to come here. We didn't even go that way because you can't get out to start with. You got to go. We went all the way back around, all the way up to Sycamore to get out. And I've been there 20 years, and it's just like doubled the traffic down Hillview since all that development went out that way. So.
Any questions for Kurt? Thank you, Kurt. Raquel, I'll let you come back.
Thank you, Jesse. Just want to clarify a few items. So first of all, some of the good news is, you know, the billboard on this property would go away. So, and that is some of the other items with garbage and things in the neighborhood. And, you know, we've been complimented so much on the aesthetics of the Dolly Farm Village project. And since the time that, you know, we did that, we have neighbors all the time come up to us and thank us for the amount of landscaping out there, the cleanliness of the development, you know, how much they're enjoying having services in the area. And, you know, these developments only work if you're part of the neighborhood. So, you know, what I try to stress always is we want them to come and support these businesses. It's the only way it works. So it's in everyone's best interest for us to be not, you know, we want to be part of the neighborhood, work together on these types of items. But just a couple of things. So the history of this particular rezoning is we had our application in for rezoning in the fall at the same time that Jerry had his application in for rezoning on some land just a little bit further to the west. So Jerry owns a group of some lots there, and when we both put those applications in, the city staff said, okay, we've got these couple different developments that want to do some commercial rezoning. They deferred both of these, Jerry's application and ours, and said, let's talk about the impact here and what this looks like and how do we feel about this with having this by the neighborhood. So then we had those meetings and had discussions with the city, and then Jerry came back at an earlier time than us, I think a month or two ago, and had his development rezoned to commercial that butts up against the neighborhood to the west. So we're, you know, coming in, and that is when we originally made our application, that's when that subject plan that he's referencing was part of our application. But since that time, we already know that that plan is not something that we're moving forward with, which is why it wasn't presented tonight, because that plan is not a valid development plan that we'll be working on at this time. So I just wanted to clarify that, yes, at the first application time, that was the plan that was shown, but that is no longer a development plan that we're utilizing. So it's still in creation. And, you know, so I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Any questions for Raquel? Thank you, Raquel. Okay, so I will look for...
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Could I have one question to staff? Can you slide that to the west? Obviously, we approved something here some time ago.
We have to close down the PowerPoint and open up the GIS maps, but yes. This, the Fullers are talking about living on Gordon Drive, which is the street to the west, and on Gordon Drive, you approved commercial development on Gordon Drive to the west. Same type of situation about 2 months ago, and what Raquel mentioned is that at that time in the fall, both of these projects came in at the same time, and planning staff's recommendation was to defer them all and say, we're not doing anything until this all gets worked out. The kind of comments that you're hearing from the neighbors tonight was exactly what we were concerned about. They have valid problems and issues out here. And we said nothing should be decided until this all gets figured out, but that's not what happened. You're still seeing it piecemeal, where they were able to come in, and Jason's now been able to bring up, and he can show you Linden, Hillview, and Gordon, and there's the properties on the west that have already gone through and been approved through this body and through City Council, where the neighbors did not show up and say that they're opposed to the development. And now on the east side, they're showing up, and you can see here, they're saying that they don't want the commercial on the east side, but we have the same concerns. We think it's going to infringe in the neighborhood. It could increase traffic. If it's done right, there may not be any problems, but we don't know that until you have a real good plan. Even the access points, until engineering sees a plan, which I know we're not talking about that because it's the zoning, but until you see a plan, all the engineering comments are being taken out of context. They're saying, if there is a proposal to rezone these properties, well then yes, you would go to Hillview. But if the proposal is to have the buildings go to the east, then you would go to the east. But they don't know that yet because they haven't seen a plan. So the question is this an appropriate location to do commercial, or is this not appropriate location to do commercial in context with what you've already done?
Madam Chair, can you talk about the history of this property? Because I think what I heard is it was zoned, parts of it were zoned commercial prior to Shape Places, and then the city, we as the city rezoned it.
Thanks for the clarification. And the neighbors even brought that up too. I think Mr. and Mrs. Fuller brought that up. The properties, thank you, Jason, stop right there for a second. The RD1 properties on Gordon and on Hillview, as well as some of the properties to the north, have single-family houses on them, but were rezoned back in the 70s and the 80s to commercial properties. But they're single-family houses. They're not commercial properties. So in 2013 and 2014, when the City of Sioux Falls rezoned every property in the City of Sioux Falls, we looked at them and said, it's not a commercial property. It's a single-family house. And we rezoned the single-family houses to single-family. We did not give them commercial property. At that point, the property owners all came back to us on Gordon and on Hillview and said, what did you do? You took away our commercial property. We said, no, you're a single-family house. We gave you single-family house. If you want to come forward and make it transparent and show up at a public hearing and explain yourself, you have a right to request commercial. But they're not commercial properties until they get rezoned commercial, which is where you're at tonight. And now you're hearing from the neighbors, or you're not hearing from the neighbors, so it gets a little confusing.
Madam Chair, Jeff, can you answer a question about, I know these types of developments are perfect for consideration during a corridor study. Has such a study been done in this area, and has staff suggested such a study happen in this area?
A corridor study has not been done. Staff requested that prior to these ones going forward, but they're going forward without a study. The nice thing about these two rezonings, and we've already discussed that, is it's only going to C2 commercial. They can't do large commercial, as Nick alluded to. It's not C3 up to 75,000 square feet. It's not C4 up to an unlimited side. It has to be only up to 25,000 square feet stores. But it hasn't been completely vetted through to talk to the neighbors about what type of landscaping, what type of businesses. Those things have not been discussed as a complete plan.
Thank you, Jeff. Any additional questions of Jeff? No? Okay. Okay. Seeing none, I'll look for commission action on item number 8. No, I think we're done. Thank you, though.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second on item number 8. Discussion?
Yes, you know, from my point of view, this is a difficult piece of property. It doesn't have its own access to Foss, so it really needs to be considered separately on its own. Its primary access, obviously, is to Hillview. You know, we try as we look at these kinds of situations to make buffer zones. You know, we've talked about landscape buffers, but the more we can have transitional properties like from single family to twin homes to other things as we work toward the arterials, those make a lot of sense. This feels like retail continues to infringe upon a neighborhood. To me, that's a pretty drastic transition element, and I think this one's a little tougher without having at least some kind of a corridor study to have a feel for what this could be and to clarify kind of that access and understanding how that works. And I've been through the Hillview Road area, and it would be a shame to completely change the character of that, which is very much what we're interested in protecting too. But we want to also give freedom to landowners too. So we have to weigh those two things separately. And in my opinion, this one is not a good fit for the rezone.
Madam Chair.
Sean? Oh, excuse me.
All right. So, and Sean, I agree with some of what you said. The hard part, or the part I'm struggling here with, is that prior to Shaped Places, the majority of this already was C2 and had been for 30 or 40 years. And so you have to kind of weigh the rights of the person that owns the land to develop it to, you know, had the plan 30 or 40 years ago that that's what he was going to do. Weigh those rights versus the neighbors who I'm guessing a lot of them maybe have bought at the same time knowing that that would have been commercial 30 or 40 years ago. But you're right, it's a tough decision. I think for the reason that it was commercial before, and the guy that owns the property did not make the change to go back to RD, I'm going to support this one because that's what he had to start with, and I think we don't want to take that away from him.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I can agree with Sean on this deal. If this was a rezone on what was zone commercial before, I think I'd have to support it. But I think this is kind of above and beyond what was zoned before. I think whenever a neighborhood is willing to come out, I think there's some other people here that didn't get an opportunity to talk. I think that's something you need to listen to just a little bit. I think we've always tried to create a buffer, and it could be as simple as Rochelle having a plan showing the buffering from this to that to maybe get a different comfort level for the neighborhood. A corridor study, I think, would go a long ways as far as, okay, how are we going to deal with traffic? I think they're right. I don't think they'll get an access on Arrowhead. I think it is going to have to come in there, come in off of Foss, and I think that's kind of up in the air.
One thing about that, I think what the comment is that there is not access onto Arrowhead from these parcels because there's property to the north. I don't know that that comment is necessarily saying there won't be. It's just that there isn't because it's bordered by other property and not the street.
Yeah,
I mean, in talking about buffer yards, I also think a lot of that is specified in code. So, you know, showing it doesn't necessarily help because it's already there, right? It is what it's going to be. It's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. It is a tough one, and at this point in time, what would be the harm in allowing a study to happen? I think the land's not going anywhere. I think that we know that this is going to happen, and what this looks like 15 or 20 years from now, we're going to see this happen. We've seen it happen along Minnesota Avenue. We've seen it happen along 41st Street. And it will continue to happen. We want to be as sensitive as we can, but, you know, maybe in lieu of a denial or maybe a deferral would be something that would be appropriate, giving time to actually allow these property owners to you know, Jerry, as well as Raquel and the group at Lloyd, and the city, to really come up with some sort of comprehensive plan that can happen between Foss and Gordon. Because the next thing that's going to happen are all those homes along Linden. And let's put a plan together. And we're just talking previously about maybe that the way that we've always done it in Sioux Falls, we've just always done it that way. Sometimes it works to our advantage and sometimes it may not. So there may be some validity in just taking our time.
Jesse, how long does a corridor study take, and who does that, and what are the costs associated with something like that?
Sure. Those are all questions that are way above my pay grade. Obviously, that's something the city undertakes, but I think that we could get Jeff back up here to discuss it, to see what the opportunity could be for that. And it's bigger than that. It's all the corridors. So there could be a significant amount of time associated with it.
I'll answer your question, but it's really a two-part question. If the item gets denied, it can't come back for 6 months. It's not denied here, it's denied at City Council. If it's deferred, it can always come back. So that's whether it's in 30 days or 6 days, but you can just defer it. At that point, we can put together a time frame for how long a study takes. And the studies are always done in the planning office. We don't have consulting dollars to go out there and study, so it's not going to cost anything. It's time that we have to spend to do it with the neighbors, and that's what we had always advocated for, is to talk to the neighbors, have a neighborhood meeting. As the gentleman mentioned, you know, going into the neighborhood, getting them involved, asking them, you know, building consensus. It's not a win-win-win. It's everybody's going to be a little bit, but you go, how does this work throughout so that Linden people get some less of an impact, and you just kind of have to work through some of those details. And I wouldn't stand up here and say it's going to be done in 27 days if in 26 days the people are going, we're not ready yet. So it might be 60 days and it might be 45. I just, it takes a while to work through the neighborhood issues.
We're talking less than 6 months, though?
Yes. Okay. Yes, we are. Thank you.
Madam Chair, what's the motion on the table right now? Is it for approval for discussion?
Yes, motion and approval for discussion. Any additional discussion? Okay.
You know, my gut is telling me it's not going to pass, so I would make a substitute motion to defer.
I'll second that.
Pardon me, defer to?
The next meeting.
A deferral, not a denial, not an
To
approval.
defer to our next.
So defer it to the May meeting.
Yep.
Or it can be deferred.
It can be deferred again if it's not done, but.
So we have a motion and a second for deferral. All those in favor?
Could you explain that motion again, please?
Sure.
Just to defer it.
Yep. Well, till the next meeting, and we can, if it's ready, we can defer.
I don't
always
know
defer it
if
again.
they'll get a corridor deal done by the next
And
meeting.
Jeff said that. If we defer it, it can come back at any time.
We can always defer it again next month.
If we deny it, it's not coming back for 6 months. So I
That
think
would
there's
be
some flexibility.
up to the petitioner at that point. If the petitioner wanted to bring it back in 4 months after a corridor study, she wouldn't have to wait the 6.
Right.
Should it be deferred until such time as the corridor study is complete?
We can just defer.
It's really up to, we just have a motion and a second for deferral.
To the next meeting.
Yes. So, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed?
No.
Okay. So 4-1, the deferral passes. So now we vote on the original motion, or the original motion dies?
The original motion dies. It's actually, it was a substitute motion, so that surpassed the original motion.
Boy, we're lucky I'm done tonight. Okay, so we have a motion and a second and an approval for deferral of item number 8, in the hopes that all the parties can come together in the next time frame to put something really comprehensive for I think really this entire neighborhood. So moving on to item number 9.
Item 9, 2360 2015 rezone from the RD1 Twin Home Duplex Residential Suburban District to the C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District for allowed forms located at 216 South Blauvelt Avenue.
Jason Bieber with planning staff. This is an application by Kevin Kane. It is a request to rezone the highlighted parcel to the C2 Commercial District for future commercial redevelopment of the site. The applicant does plan to combine this parcel with the one to the north and demolish the existing service station and redevelop the site for a multi-tenant commercial use. The proposed multi-tenant retail building will require the 10-foot off of East 10th and South Blauvelt Avenue. The proposed multi-tenant concept plan that you can see in front of you with that proposal would require 18 parking spaces. Future retail development on this site will require a level B buffer yard along the south property line adjacent to an existing DD single-family form to the south. This buffer yard does require a 30-foot setback, 4-foot high berm or a 6-foot high fence, and 40 units of landscaping for every 100 lineal feet. And also a parking lot may encroach into that buffer yard by 10 feet. However, then that will require a 4-foot high fence and a 2-foot berm along that south property line. The north, west, and east property lines will not require any buffering since they are adjacent to C2 commercial and retail forms. The proposed rezoning meets the Sioux Falls comprehensive plan. The parcel will be combined with the existing C2 commercial parcel to the north and redevelop the parcels for a multi-tenant retail use. A level C buffer yard was required along that south property line, and the required fence or berm and landscaping should alleviate any of the possible incompatibilities between the retail use and the existing single-family residential to the south. The comprehensive plan does show this area to be a developed area and previously zoned. Testimony during the public hearing tonight should shape the decision of the zoning matters. The required level C buffer yard should alleviate incompatibilities to the existing residential uses to the south. Because the subject application is consistent with the Sioux Falls comprehensive plan, approval of this zoning would be acceptable, and staff would happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? No? Thank you, Justin. Will the petitioner come forward, please?
Good evening. I'm Kevin Kane. Along with my wife, we are here for the zoning request on the property on East 10th Street and the south on Blauvelt. Just to give you a little background, my wife and I had a veterinary supply business in Brandon, South Dakota for many years. We recently sold that and have been looking at opportunities in Sioux Falls to maybe do something on the retail end, something that we can do together again. And we started looking last fall for 1,000 to 1,500 square feet retail space within the parameter of downtown, somewhere within a half mile to a mile. We spent 6 months trying to find property. We couldn't find any that met our needs. So we started to look and decided that maybe we wanted to look at investing in some property and developing it for people just like ourselves that are looking for that 1,000 to 1,500 square feet of retail space on a major artery. So we're here to request the rezoning of about, I think it's a very small, maybe 1/10 of an acre to a 1/15 of an acre, just south of the commercial property that sits on East 10th. Originally, it was built as a gas station in the late 50s. It then switched over to just an auto body shop. It has been remediated. All the tanks have been moved out. We have tests done by Geotech to confirm that, along with the letter from the State Department of Natural Resources. We do think it'll complement that area, and it's really all commercial to the east, west, and north, and we are very willing to do whatever is required by the city in terms of that buffer between us and that resident to the south. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Kevin?
Kevin, did you talk to any of the neighbors before the meeting tonight?
I did not. The only resident that we have residential is to the south, and they were notified of the proposed rezoning request, and as far as we know, that they were happy with that. I don't know if Jason.
The neighbor to that parcel to the south did give us a call and had some questions on it. I explained what they were doing, and I believe I even emailed the site plan to her, and she seemed in support of the request. She didn't have an issue with it.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anybody in the audience wish to speak to this item? No? Seeing none, I'll look for commission action on item number 9.
Move for approval.
Second.
Madam Chair, if I can, what a difference between this one and the one before.
Yep.
Yes. You know, and I think that's why we can't take them in a fell swoop. You know, they have to be looked at individually.
Surrounded by C2.
Yep.
And obviously no neighbor hesitation. I think it'd be very easy for me to support this one because of those reasons.
Thank you, Kenny. Anybody else?
Second what Kenny said, it makes it a nice even C2 line there.
It does, and again, you know, we're back in this core that's been developed for such a long time. You end up with a really odd-shaped parcel of land that, you know, it does offer the opportunity to square things up there, and again, additional redevelopment on that site. So,
nice.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed? Item number 9 passes.
Item 10, 2332-2015, alternative site plan to provide an alternative buffer yard located at 111 West 17th Street.
Jason Bieber again with planning staff. This is an application by Touchmark at All Saints, and as most people are aware, they're looking at constructing a substantial addition east of the existing structure, and they are proposing to construct the required buffer in a different way than what's required by the ordinance. The site is improved with the existing senior housing facility and associated parking lot on the west portion of the lot. Further, this site does contain many mature trees along West 17th Street, South Phillips Avenue, and on 18th Street. The buffer yard requirements, according to the zoning ordinance, this specific area of Phillips Avenue is part of the urban core, and it does consist of a few single-family houses. However, the majority of the original houses within this area along Phillips Avenue and West 18th Street have been converted to more apartment uses. Further, there also are apartments along the north portion of the site along 17th Street. Therefore, a level B buffer yard is required for the majority of the north, east, and south sides of the property. This buffer yard does require a 15-foot setback, a 2-foot berm or a 4-foot fence, and 30 units of landscaping per every 100 lineal feet. There are roughly 3 parcels that are being used as single-family uses, which are DD2 or DD3 forms. 2 of them are located directly east across Phillips Avenue, and then one of them is located directly south on the corner of South Dakota Avenue and West 18th Street. And adjacent to these, the site is required what's called the level D buffer yard, and that requires a 22.5-foot setback, a 6-foot berm, and 50 units of landscaping for every 100 lineal feet. The proposal that they're looking at doing, their alternative buffer yard plan is up on the screen right now. They are proposing to comply with all of the requirements of the level B buffer yard and some of the level D buffer yard requirements. The plan does indicate more of a uniform 15-foot setback along Phillips Avenue and 18th Street. Further, the applicant indicates that the required 2- and 6-foot berm, which would be kind of, in certain spots it'd be 2 feet, certain spots it'd be 6 feet, would require the removal of 13 mature shade trees along West 17th and South Phillips Avenue. Instead of that required berm, the applicant is proposing to supplement the existing trees in along those 2 streets with an additional 13 additional trees and roughly 93 shrubs and perennials to be placed along South Phillips Avenue. The applicant is also proposing to place 22 deciduous shade trees along the proposed addition along West 18th Street, and then 1 ornamental tree. Finally, the total number of landscape units as required by the ordinance is roughly 368 units, and they are proposing, once everything is all said and done, to have roughly 555 landscape units, so an increase of around 200 units. The proposed buffer yard should provide the adequate buffering of the proposed addition to the neighboring residential properties. The required 2- and 6-foot berm will do little to buffer a 4-story building from adjacent residential properties across 17th, 18th, and South Phillips Avenue. Therefore, staff feels keeping the existing mature trees as well as providing 30 more deciduous shade trees will do a better job of screening the building than the required berm. Finally, additional landscape units in the form of shrubs and perennials will also help fill in any gaps from the existing and proposed trees. Because the application has provided clarity to indicate the location, nature, and extent of the work proposed, and the proposed buffer yard landscaping should adequately buffer the property, staff does recommend approval of this alternative site plan. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of staff?
Just so I understand this, we've approved the zoning.
Correct.
For this, for them to do the addition. We did that some time ago. This is just looking at the site plan or the landscape plan.
Yep, this would strictly be the what they are proposing for their buffer yard.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jason? Now, Jason, we've done a significant number of alternate site plans as it relates to landscaping since the passage of Shape Places. Can you explain overall conceptually when is it a good idea to do that and move away from the existing standard?
What most of the ones that we've approved in the past have been similar circumstances where there's quite a few existing mature trees, and then requiring them to do a required berm, which obviously takes, if it's 6 foot, it's going to take 15, 20 feet to do that berm. A lot of these trees would be removed, these ones that have been there forever, and staff just feels that that's maybe not an adequate way to construct the buffer yard. They'd rather see a 40-foot tree than a little 6-foot berm, you know, instead of doing the berm. They would rather see the trees. And this is a similar circumstance to that.
Thank you. Any additional questions? No. Thank you. Is the petitioner here, please? You're not Amy, I'm guessing.
No, not today. Jeff Bolt with Sayre Associates. We're the project engineer representing Touchmark at All Saints. This project site presents several developmental related challenges with respect to the berming, required berming and buffer yard. One, as Jason alluded to, the required berms would wipe out quite a few of the existing well-developed trees, including a 60-inch cottonwood, some very large lilac bushes, some spruce trees, several hackberry along the east side. So that would be detrimental to the existing trees. It is our goal to preserve as many of the existing trees as possible. Another challenge is the 18-foot of elevation difference from the north side to the south side in creating berms, especially along Phillips on the east side. The existing stormwater drains off towards Phillips, and if we were to create a berm along there, it would basically channelize that runoff and concentrate it into a point discharge on 17th. And in this case, it would actually channel that stormwater runoff right towards our building. So berms really would be difficult to deal with and as far as the drainage situation goes. Another issue, the right-of-way line on 18th Street is basically at the back of curb. There is no boulevard, there's no area for the sidewalk. The existing sidewalk is actually on private property. That creates an issue there where we're actually losing the right-of-way buffer yard. As Jason mentioned too, another item here of concern is there's multiple land use forms opposite sides of the street here, so the required berms would be anywhere from 2 to 6 foot, so it basically create kind of a roller coaster type berm effect, just not really what the petitioner is after here. One other concern along 18th Street, quite a few of the existing trees are elm and ash, and landscape staff at our office have indicated that, of course, the elm are very susceptible to Dutch elm disease. He didn't feel that these trees probably have many more years of life, a couple of years at most. Another concern is the ash trees. The ash borer is on its way, whether we like it or not. That's projected to be here in 1 to 2 years. So these existing trees may not have many more years of life in them. So as a part of our proposal, those trees would come out and we would replace them with more of a columnar type tree that would grow more vertical than round, and it would basically create a kind of a living green screen for the building. So there are some challenges, but they're not insurmountable. Our goals in preparing this alternative site plan were, as I said, to preserve as many of the trees as possible by eliminating the berming or reducing the berming and creating an aesthetic boundary that meets or actually exceeds the requirements of the planting, the zoning planting requirements. In doing this, we would not remove any of the trees on the north side along 17th Street. We would actually supplement trees on the north side. As I mentioned, the columnar trees along 18th Street would create that living screen wall, do much more of a buffer purpose than a berm. And along Phillips, we would create landscape beds and bermed islands, which would still allow proper drainage over to Phillips Avenue, but yet would fill in those gaps between the existing trees and the proposed trees that we are intending to place along Phillips. So again, our goal is to allow development of this property, but still preserve the trees and the aesthetic value. It's like a park. And the intent is to do everything we can to preserve that and promote it with additional trees. So I'd be happy to address any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Jeff? No. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Anybody in the audience wish to address this item?
My name is Richard Farnham. I live on 18th Street, 319 West 18th Street. I live across the street from Touchmark. I like the neighborhood the way it is. I wasn't prepared to give a speech here, but when I got this letter in the mail, I wasn't quite sure what an alternative site plan means. And I think a new building on the east side of Touchmark would ruin the ambiance of the neighborhood as it is now. I believe that Touchmark is in a historical district. And if it is in a historical district, adding a new building is going to change the quality of the neighborhood. There'll also be additional traffic. And I guess I'm not in favor of an alternative site plan. And I would ask that you do some additional studies perhaps before approving or not approving the site plan. That's all.
Richard, just to clarify, and maybe for the rest of you here as well, we approved the zoning for Touchmark several months ago. So what we're talking about here tonight is that site plan. We're talking about landscaping and trees. As it relates to the building, that was approved several months ago. So while I can appreciate what you're saying, we're now on to what the landscaping around that building that they're going to put up looks like.
Well, I didn't know that you had approved it, but I don't usually come to these meetings, but I appreciate you hearing me out.
Of course. Thank you for coming forward.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Katrina Lair McKinney. I'm the president of the All Saints Neighborhood Association. And I realize that tonight you are just talking about the landscape and the trees. However, our neighborhood association has asked me to make a statement on their behalf. And that's why I'm here tonight, because what you approved tonight also deals with the ramifications of the project in general. Here's the statement as it is written. Since the redevelopment of the All Saints campus was undertaken in the 1990s, we believe Touchmark has been a strong neighbor and an important catalyst in helping revitalize our neighborhood. There is no question that the dilapidated property needed new life, and Touchmark and the former Waterford was responsible for making this happen. Today, you're hearing from Touchmark at All Saints. You've already approved the proposal of the 109,000 square foot addition. But we believe that as a neighborhood, this large-scale 4-story addition, if not done properly, is going to have an adverse effect on our All Saints historical district. The Sioux Falls Board of Historic Preservation has reviewed Touchmark's plans carefully and voted them down twice, citing concerns about the overall size and scale, dwarfing the 130-year-old historic buildings, and we strongly agree with the board's concerns on those issues. The 2 remaining historic buildings on the campus provide a significant identity to our city and specifically our neighborhood. This is our neighborhood logo. It has an architectural element from All Saints on it. Our neighborhood is named after All Saints neighborhood, so we're very tied to this property. And we know that there are very few 130-year-old buildings left in Sioux Falls. These buildings have been protected and cared for, and we strongly encourage Touchmark to continue to protect them, and more importantly, to ensure that they are highlighted, not hidden in any new construction that takes place. Specifically, we encourage Touchmark to follow the strict guidelines that are set out by the Secretary of the Interior for the protection of historic structures and related to new construction. The second concern for our neighborhood association is the loss of mature trees that has been talked about tonight, and that what would happen with this new construction. Along with the 130-year-old buildings helping provide a historic identity to the neighborhood, mature trees are one of the key reasons that citizens purchase homes in our central neighborhood. Once removed, these mature trees can never be replaced. We strongly encourage Touchmark to minimize the loss of mature trees on their campus for this and any new construction project. It sounds like that they are addressing that. To be clear, the All Saints Neighborhood Association does not oppose plans by Touchmark to build another addition on their campus, but we do care deeply about preserving the integrity of the historic buildings and minimizing the loss of mature trees. We strongly encourage Touchmark to reevaluate their design plans to address these 2 meaningful concerns. And we encourage the Board of Historic Preservation, the Sioux Falls Planning Commission, and the Sioux Falls City Council and Mayor to oppose the current plans until these concerns are addressed. And we look forward to resolving these concerns alongside Touchmark as a partner.
Thank you, Katrina. Any additional questions for Katrina?
I had one. You said it was a 109,000 square foot addition?
That's what we read. Is that
I was
correct?
thinking that's the total square footage of the combined facility, and the addition is closer to 38,000 square feet.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
And I could be wrong? No?
No.
It's a 4-story. The footprint of it is 38,000 square feet, but it is 4 stories.
Okay, so that's per story. Gotcha. Never mind. Thank you for clarifying that, Diane.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on this item?
My name is Mark Weber. Does this planning commission know what a mature tree consumes during an average rainfall? This is an empirical question. The absence of such trees has an impact on those of us in the All Saints neighborhood who live downstream from Touchmark. Most of this neighborhood does not contain storm drainage, but relies on the Ellison Eastern Railroad right-of-way to provide runoff conduit, which eventually empties into the Sioux River to the east. I'm asking, what is the hydrology impact of this project? I think Public Works usually addresses this question. I live on First Avenue, which regularly floods during heavy rainfalls at the railroad tracks. The culverts just can't handle this water. In fact, when Second Avenue was rebuilt several years ago, new culverts under the street were replaced with larger ones a year after construction because a hydrology study had not been done. That's what the Public Works Department said, why they were replacing it so soon. We have a very good, All Saints neighborhood has a very good relationship with Ellison Eastern Railroad because this will be the third year that we clean up debris annually, which helps in this problem. I, as a property owner and taxpayer, don't want to be paying more in the future because downstream drainage aspect of this project has been overlooked. I might suggest maybe that this project might need a small retention pond in the northeast corner of the property. Thank you.
Hang on, Mark. Are there any questions? No. Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. George Hamilton. We own two properties which are directly across the street on 17th, which would also be to the west. We are at 208 and 212 West 17th, right the middle, right there. We own those two properties. We purchased those properties in 2006 when they had become an eyesore to the neighborhood and everything. And we have since purchased several other properties on Main Avenue and in the process of closing on property directly at the intersection of Dakota and 17th right now. We have a very mature tree in one of our front yards, which is an ash tree, which is probably 40 to 50 feet tall right now. We had several ashes in the backyard. The ice storm forced most of those to have to be taken down. The ash that's there now is gonna have to come down because it has become an insurance hazard as they've looked at it right now. When we moved a house from 618 South Main to 814 South Main, city required that we replace the trees that we took down on that property which we cleared. We brought in a 20-foot river birch in, which would be a mature tree. There was not a sapling that was brought in and everything. So my only concern is that the trees that Sayer and All Saints proposed to be brought in, that the fact is not overlooked that you bring in a 5-6 foot bush that's gonna grow to be 40 feet, when at the same time you could bring in a 15 to 20 foot tall tree and set that on the property and stuff to start the buffer instead of just waiting down the line and stuff, because the trees are a very important part of the neighborhood and the way the neighborhood is presented as it looks. So if all they're allowed to do is to bring in the small trees that will eventually be mature trees, then that's what's going to upset a lot of the neighbors around there as far as what you're going to look at, because you're going to clear out a swath of trees. You're going to have a whole bunch of plantings come in and stuff, which will take time to mature over the years. But for the first 10 to maybe even 15 years, it will take time, and you won't have cover for there. So there will be more drainage, as he addressed, that comes from that there. But I think that all of that there can be addressed if Touchmark and the developer are willing to invest in more mature trees than just starting out with just saplings.
Thank you, George. Any questions for George?
Not a question, but George, thank you. I'm familiar with those two houses you cleaned up. Good job.
Anybody else? We'll take one more. Okay? No. Thank you. I'll look for commission action on item number 10.
Motion to approve for discussion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on item number 10 for discussion purposes.
Well, to me, this alternative landscape plan makes a lot of sense. It looks like Sayre's retaining many of the mature trees, and you can't retain them all, but it looks like they're doing a fair number of those. To do the alternatives to the berming, to retain as many of those as possible, makes a lot of sense to me. I think I'd petition the original proposer and the seconder to maybe add a minimum of 2-inch caliper to all of the new trees. I believe that would be appropriate for this to address the concern and help the alternative site plan to mature as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Sean. Anything else?
Just to dovetail on what Sean said, I feels, as I understand this, that this will be better than the existing buffer requirements in terms of maintaining the existing mature trees and the eclectic landscaping that everybody has been commenting on.
Thank you, Kurt.
Well, one comment on drainage. Some of the comments we had in our staff report revolved around drainage, and that because the site will need to do some looking at what the runoff is going to be, and it can exceed what currently comes off. So whether that's them building a detention pond or something else to make sure that no additional water runs off the site than currently does, I think that issue will definitely be addressed for those concerned neighbors. And I would say, and Sean, I would think you could make that amendment on the tree size if that's something you wanted to do.
I would like to make that amendment that we add the requirement for a 2-inch caliper minimum on all of the trees.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Agree with that. I mean, I live in this area, and I mean, there's a lot of existing trees on this property, and I hate to see them go away. But I think they're actually doing, using some of the existing trees to kind of help with that. I mean, it's like a park-like setting. I mean, you walk by it every day, you walk through there, and I know we don't want it all to go away, but they have a right to, do what they're doing too. So just try to find that happy medium to basically keep the most trees we can, the existing trees. And I think they're trying to do the best they can.
I would agree, Larry. I think that I'm quite frankly glad that only 13 trees of all the trees that are there need to come out. I too have some ash and elm tree and a big ash in my backyard that is going to be a big problem going forward. And so I recognize that I think exactly like George said, they look great now, but some of them are going to have to come down regardless of what happens when that happens. And I think if we can get a jump start on redeveloping some of that while maintaining a really significant historic piece of the core of Sioux Falls. There is no doubt that All Saints has a deep meaning to so many people in the city of Sioux Falls. It's where they lived as they were children. It's where they went to school. I think that Touchmark has tried to be a good neighbor up till now, and I would not see anything that would change that going forward. And I think that's where I really appreciate the flexibility of what Shape Sioux Falls has done, because had we not had any opportunity to have an alternate site plan, there would be a lot more trees coming down. There would be a lot less of a landscaping buffer than we would have now, and really we would be starting at ground zero. To see that there's going to be 555 landscaping units versus the 368 landscaping units now. When you add a building of that significant size, but you add 200 more landscaping units to it, that will be significant as well.
So with just a question, a 2-inch, round tree, how tall are they when they come in? Is that?
I think it varies by species, and I'm not a landscape architect, but I have heard from a number of landscape architects that 2-inch is the optimal size to plant because they take root fast and they grow quickly. When you put in too large of a tree, it actually stunts its growth and it takes longer to establish its place and start to grow. And so usually it's said that, given another 5 years, the 2-inch will actually pass up the 4-inch that's been planted. So 2 inches kind of a good minimum value to make sure that we have mature trees, not saplings like was mentioned, but something that is going to establish quickly and grow quickly.
Thank you. Any other commission discussion?
We can all just add, I think this is a well-done plan. I think you guys did a good job in putting it together, and it looks like it will be very nice for the neighbors.
And I appreciate the neighborhood involvement as well. We have seen the benefits of what neighborhood groups bring to all neighborhoods across our city, and I would encourage you to remain active and invested in your certainly in your neighborhood, but in our community and city at large. Anything else? I'll look for commission action on item number 10 with an amendment.
I think we have to vote on the amendment
I'm sorry.
first.
Yes, we have to vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the overall. Okay. So all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Now we're going to vote on item number 10. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed? None. So item number 10 passes with an amendment for 2-inch trees at minimum.
Item 11, 2183-2015 preliminary subdivision plan for USF South Campus addition located east of South Cliff Avenue and north and south of East 77th Street.
Jason Bieber again with the planning staff. This is an application by Eric Wildston, preliminary subdivision plan, and the future uses for this property are commercial, multifamily residential, and some institutional uses. This subject property was annexed into the city in February of 2015, and then it was rezoned in March of 2015. The plan submitted is consistent with the approved USF South rezoning approved by the council in March. The traffic impact study has been accepted by engineering in the last 24 hours. Therefore, only a few minor tasks are left to be completed in Sire. And because the traffic impact study memorandum has been accepted by the City of Sioux Falls Engineering Department, staff would like to amend their original recommendation of deferral and replace it with approval now that that document has been accepted. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Jason?
I feel like asking, what did the transportation study tell you? But I'm sure that would be an engineering question.
That would be above my pay grade also.
So I won't ask
Welcome
the
to the
question.
club. Okay. Thank you. Is the petitioner here, please?
Good evening, Eric Willardson on Engineering here tonight on behalf of the University of Sioux Falls and their intent to develop south of the stadium. Yes, Kenny, the traffic study was approved. That's why we were deferred for a month. I thought that would have brought me to the head of the line, but apparently it brings you up last. But anyway, I think we're ready to move forward. If you have any questions, I'd certainly be happy to answer them, but I think we're ready to move this one forward.
Any questions for Eric? Eric, that red line, it looks like Highway 100 to the
Correct.
south? Okay.
Future Highway 100.
Sure. In the not so distant future, I hope. Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks.
Anybody from the audience here to speak on this item? No? Okay. Seeing none, I'll look for commission action on item number 11.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed? Item number 11 carries.
Under new business, there is Planning Commissioner recognition of service.
Not on my agenda.
On mine.
On mine.
Hi. No relation to a fellow Schmitz in the audience, but I don't think I've ever had to do this in my 15 years of service where I've had to give an honorable award to the chairperson as she's going out. What a job she's done tonight. Okay. I have a little script here that I'd like to read, but for Jessie to step up again tonight is everything I'm going to read tonight. I mean, the planning commissioners that serve this City of Sioux Falls have to be appreciated and honored, because what you do after 10 years is you serve this community so admirably and do everything for this community. And then when we need you, you're able to jump in and run a fantastic meeting. And that's amazing. So Jessie Schmidt, for 10 years, since May of 2005, you've exemplified civic dedication and pride in Sioux Falls, South Dakota by serving on the Planning Commission. Citizens of Sioux Falls, in her Planning Commission service, she has attended over 240 City Planning Commission meetings. She's served as the Planning Commission chairperson and the vice chairperson. She's served with 15 other planning commissioners. She's served on the signage and the Downtown 2025 study groups and made recommendations to City Council for ordinance revisions. She's served under 2 mayors and city governments. She has supported the adoption of the 2035 Comprehensive Shape Sioux Falls, and she has helped support the first major City of Sioux Falls zoning ordinance in 30 years, Shape Places. She also participated in approximately 1,500 public hearing recommendations to City Council. 1,500. So in a small little 10 years of your life that have quickly gone by just like that. Your civic dedication and pride is also demonstrated by the manner in which you have had outstanding meeting attendance, served on various task force committees, and supported the Sioux Falls planning and public hearing process. You have adhered to the spirit of Sioux Falls' comprehensive plan for the betterment of Sioux Falls and all its citizens. Your most recent participation efforts include laying the foundation for increased development standards within Shape Sioux Falls, and again tonight with Downtown 2025. You are truly amazing, as you have found time to balance your career as a professional, as a civic volunteer. Jessie, on behalf of city officials, the mayor, city council, past and present planning commissioners, the planning staff, and all other city employees, it is truly my pleasure to present you this evening with a token of our appreciation for your 10 years of dedicated service. Members of the audience that's left, please let's give a round of applause to Jessie Schmidt.
Well, I feel bad for these poor people that have no idea why they're asked to stand and clap for some stranger. But thank you very much for the recognition. It truly has been an honor to serve the City of Sioux Falls in this capacity. I was said tonight, when I look back, I mean, 10 years is a long time, and so much has been accomplished. Really because of the support of the people that sit around you at this table. We are not a rubber stamp for the City of Sioux Falls. We are chosen, I hope, because we have independent thoughts and ideas that we want to contribute, but we are volunteers, and we do spend a significant amount of time, all because of the city that we love and the communities that we love. And to have people come out and support their neighborhoods, that's really what it's all about. So thank you.
Be so bold. We've also blessed with her better half is here today. That's Mr. Schmidt over there in the corner.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.